In this episode of Your Geek Fix, we're going to be making this Nuka Cola Thirst Zapper look and operate the way it does in the game. And the best part is we're going to do it for around $10. Better stay tuned. This is Your Geek Fix. Hi, I'm Jeremy. This is Your Geek Fix, and this is the Nuka Cola Thirst Zapper. The same one that I upgraded over 2 years ago. Actually, around the time that I made the working Pip-Boy. And you might remember that when I made this, the whole point was to make it look like a heavy metal gun, like an old-fashioned toy. But when I picked it up, the thing that kind of messed with my brain was the fact that it was as light as paper. I mean, it's super, super light, but it looks like it's really heavy. And a lot of you made comments to recommend that I put rocks in it or weight it in some other ways to make it feel like the real thing. But something nobody actually mentioned was putting actual working parts inside to make it work just like the one in the game. Which it only makes sense that we would do. I mean, that's part of what our channel is for, is trying to make props look and work like they did in the actual games and movies that they come from. And at first, I did have an idea. I had this idea that I could go through and put in a motor or a pump, just add a little bit of a water reservoir and a battery, and just power it myself. But then I figured, well, that would cost a little bit when I looked at my prices. I mean, it would cost me a little bit. Also, I was hoping that there was something out there that kind of already worked that way, that we could just easily modify, that I could show to you and that you could pretty easily do or feel confident in doing. But at the time, I couldn't find anything that was like that. And then, this year, I started working on a TEMU video. TEMU, right? And this big deep dive rabbit hole situation that I got myself into. And it was during that time, though, that I discovered these. For less than $10. These are electronic water pistols. They work really well. They shoot water really far. It's really narrow and precise, and even it comes with at least a couple of these refillable clips. Check it out. It has this little release right here, so I can do the quick John Wick thing to switch it out. Switch it out. So that's pretty cool. And it has a rechargeable battery in it, which I can actually pull out a little charger for, see, just like that. So it only made sense that there's something here that I could probably easily modify. I mean, for that price, I don't feel bad taking this apart, and I think it would work really, really well. But I'm still going to need to be able to do some things. I'm going to need to make it so I can easily charge it, because I want to make it just like the real one. I'm going to need to make it so that when I open this up, I can just pour the water in and then seal it to be able to use it from there. Now, you might notice I actually had two of these, so I'm also not going to tear open this one. I'm going to try doing it with a new one, and I wanted to do this for the purpose of a special event that I'm going to this year. I am going to the Fallout New Vegas event in Good Springs, Nevada. So I wanted to be able to do something that was kind of Nuka Cola themed. So I'm going to have on an outfit that's Nuka Cola based. I've got a Pip-Boy that I'm working on right now that I'm hoping to get done by that point, which will also be Nuka Cola themed. And I've also got this carrying case, which is Nuka Cola themed. I also got two of these pistols just in case, so I can have a couple of stabs at it. So the first thing I think we need to do is to take these guns apart and see kind of how they work. So everything that makes this work really is just right here. So it appears that the way this works is a pumping action this direction like this. And what's driving that up and down is this piece right here. And so it hooks like that. There's another one that's tied to this motor right here. So when it spins, it's turning that piece. And then what's tying these two pieces together is this one right here, which should go right about like that. So when it spins, as you can see, it makes that go up and down, just like that. And that's all there is to it. That's what's making the pump work. The water is being drawn in through this tube from that pumping action and then shooting out that direction. And inside of here, what you'll notice, so what we have is a plunger right? Just like instead of a shot that's going in and out. And then that's what's pushing the water through here. Let's test this and see how well I can draw from here. So, there we go. There it goes! Ha ha ha! It works. So, at any rate, clearly I can shoot water. And it sounds and looks just like it should from the game, I think. So, step one is done. The next piece is how do we fit it inside the other? And then what kind of container should I have for doing this? So, we're going to take apart this Nuka Cola gun and see how well I can make it work. This thing has some wires in here, and those wires are really sensitive. Both the guns that I had, when I went to open it, both of them broke because the wires are not only thin, but they're exactly the right length. So when you go to take it apart, chances are they're going to break, and so I had to solder them in order to get them to work again. Now, everything on here is held together with screws, with the exception of this piece right here. This piece is held together with a screw at this end. It looks like this end also has a screw, so it looks like that's all I have to do to take it apart. And unfortunately, that is not everything. So it is also glued down here at this end. So that means I'm not going to be able to get this off of here very well without essentially either breaking it, which is something in this particular case I might go ahead and do. And I'll tell you the reasoning for that later on, but I'm going to have to really separate these pieces in order to be able to get it to come off of this gun. Here's our little board that has all the sound. These are the wires that I mentioned earlier. They're really frail that I never reconnected. They're supposed to go out through here, and then what's funny is they put screws that go through here that easily go through those wires, but as you can see, they don't really reach very well to that end. So I think on the other one I actually had to go through and add some wire to it to make it reach. I'm just not interested in keeping any of these parts, so we're going to go ahead and take the rest of this apart too. Now, even though it seems to fit all right, and even though it looks like it will work, the problem is I'm going to need the tubes to be clear, both here in this end of the gun, as well as the tube back here for filling it up. And as you can see, we have several obstacles along the way. So I got this large bit and just drilled on both ends to kind of open up some holes. And then the rest of the area, I just kind of cut things down. I really like sprue cutters of different types, and I used these quite a bit. I liked it a lot. It just made the whole project a lot easier and faster, and I was able to remove what I needed to without breaking anything too much. Once when everything was modified where it looked like I could make it work, the next step was to go through and paint it. And this is where a lot of additional questions came in. What do I want this gun to look like? I mean, do I want to do the same thing I did last time? Make it look exactly the same? I knew I didn't want to do that because part of my project for going out to the New Vegas event was also a Pip-Boy that I'm redoing. And with that, I kind of want to do something similar to my other Pip-Boy where it looks, you know, kind of shiny and new. I got all sorts of paints. I got all sorts of red paints and glosses that are everything from things that are sparkly to things that are metallic, and experimented with what I could do to get the effect that I wanted. I decided what I wanted was something that looked like it was pre-Fallout, at the same time keeps the same general aesthetic. As with the first gun, I decided to use my hammered metal. I love this stuff. I've used it in a lot of my projects. If you watched a lot of my videos, you've seen me use it for all sorts of different things, including the Pip-Boy 3000. It gives it a great texture, and it also is very, very good at binding with the plastic and remaining there where if you want to scratch off paint, you can see that metal underneath. Another thing about using a lot of metallics is they kind of keep that outer shell cool, which makes it feel a lot more like it's real metal and not just something that's painted plastic. Then I wanted to use my paint, and luckily I experimented beforehand with some of my red paints that I was looking at using, and I got this effect. So I'd never had that happen before with some of my other projects or with the previous gun that I did. But then again, if you remember, I sprayed on a lot of layers all at once because I was trying to get a certain effect. And I apologize to my friend Classic Glue because he tried to go through and follow my last video and he ran into this problem. And I told him I never had that happen before, but obviously it is an issue. So I decided I had to put on some primer. So I used a really basic flat gray primer before I put on any of my red. Now don't worry, this won't prevent you from being able to scratch off that paint afterwards and still have the metal show underneath. But this will prevent some of those errors and weird things that might occur. Of course, I masked off some of my details before I went over and sprayed it again with that red paint. Once when it was dry, I went back and decided to do something similar to what I did with the first one, which is adding some details. I went around some of the letters, went around the circle areas, some of the vents and the screws, and I exposed some of that metal, which isn't my plan to leave it exposed. I just figured this will give me more texture and character for when I put on that final layer. And I didn't put it on evenly. I wanted to make sure that also, like the first one, it would help me give it a little bit of shading and also emphasize some of the details. I kind of wanted the end, unlike last time, I made it kind of smooth for the fact that it was supposed to be so old, that cap. I wanted to have more detail because that would be the part that would be hitting things the most or that would be scratched up the most. So I went in just that. I scratched it up just by sanding it, and it gave it a great effect. I actually liked it enough I was tempted not to put on the clear coat on top of it. Once when I was done with the red, it looked great. It looked perfect. The last thing that I had to do was the lettering, and I was really going back and forth. I knew I wanted it to look really nice on this gun, and so I did want to put on some white paint, or at least I thought I did. I knew I wanted it to be kind of glossy, I wanted it to be thick, and that's what I started to do. And totally scrapped it. I hated it, every bit of it. I didn't like it at all. Because the paint color I was looking for, the one that stood out in my mind from my youth, that I knew was exactly the look I wanted, was Tonka White. Tonka made metal toy trucks, which I had when I was a kid, and they were big enough, actually, that I could even get on mine and ride it down a hill. Most of them were yellow, but they also had a few that were red, or that had other colors. And while a lot of their vehicles also had black paint, there was also white paint. And this white paint was interesting because no matter how much you buried your trucks or what you did to them, that stuff didn't go away. I mean, the yellow paint on my vehicles came off, the thing would rust, and yet the letters were still there. I don't know what they made it with. I mean, maybe it was probably lead or something like that back then. But it was interesting, and it was always smooth, and it was always shiny. And that's what I wanted. I wanted at least that look. And originally I was going to go through and spray it, or try to spray it on. But sometimes that leaves some shadowing that doesn't quite look right, even when you use a stencil. And so I thought I'd just experiment, just try something out. And I took some white vinyl and cut out my Nuka Cola, put it on, and quite frankly, it looks great. I like it a lot. I think it looks perfect. It's exactly what I was wanting. I mean, it looks exactly like how I pictured it. Sure, there's imperfections and things from the manufacturing, and of course, as it's been shipped or moved around, there's minor scratches and dents, but at the same time, overall, it's a beautiful piece of work. I just love the way that everything looks. And I started assembling it just enough where I can put in some of my components. The problem is I won't be able to use the clip. I did try. I looked at how well it fit underneath. I did think about it, but the way that it would load wouldn't quite work right. It's built for being in this position, so when it's sideways, the water would be kind of stuck in reservoirs, so it would only be getting half the water, and it's hard for me to take this part and put it back together in a way that it would be watertight. So for that reason, I'm gonna have to come up with something else. Plus I need something where I can still pour water into it from the back of the gun. So I went to Walmart and I bought these little containers. I got this inside the travel section where you'll find the mini shampoos and things like that. And so it's a perfectly sized container shaped in such a way that I think I'd be able to both store liquid in it, pull it out, and that I can also be able to feed water into it from the bottom. Now, while this already has a hose that can go inside, I needed another hose and way to be able to pour water into it from the back of the gun. And so what I did is I got this piece right here, which I got inside the plumbing section at Ace Hardware, and then also a tube, but it was just the right size to fit inside. This will also be my first time of using this stuff. This is clear silicone. Typically I'd use caulk or something like that that would be able to seal some things. I just figured this would be easier to apply, and supposedly it's used for like aquariums and things, and should be able to help me make those entry areas for the tubes watertight. I inserted my 2 tubes and sealed them with that silicone. And I also tested it. I actually filled it up with water and it kept a good seal. So surprisingly, it works, but the stuff is really sticky and kind of still stays gooey. It doesn't really harden to any level. I found that the parts fit pretty well. I even have this area down here in the battery section that looks like it would hold things pretty well, from the battery itself to even my charger. Initially I was going to use the button that came with this, but the problem with that, it's a momentary switch, is that it didn't quite fit right where the trigger is. And in version 2, I decided to just go ahead and connect directly to the original switch. So basically I got the red wire that goes down to the middle of the switch, a continuation of that wire that comes from the bottom switch and goes into my battery. The problem I ran into is that the red wire looked like it wasn't going to be long enough, so I had to solder another wire, and this was a weird gauge of wire, or at least it wasn't one that I had in the household. I don't have a lot of local places where I can just go buy a wire very easily that isn't more industrial. So I decided to sacrifice the other gun and use the wires from that to be able to extend it. Next trick was that I need this placed in such a way that it's going to be able to shoot out the end. Because unfortunately, with how wide it is, thanks to this part right here, I couldn't fit it far enough into the barrel. So I experimented and experimented. I actually used clay and kind of built up the inside so that it would hold everything in place, and then I could make slight alterations on angling that piece until finally it just shot out just in the right way. I also put a little bit of clay on the other side to keep it from moving around too much. But to tell you the truth, the reason I was just going to use foam, the reason why I used clay was because I also needed weight. Remember the paper, lighter than paper problem that I had with the first one? I needed to use enough of that clay that would add enough weight that when I held it, it would feel just right. Once when everything seemed to be in the exact places I needed them, I pushed it together, screwed it together, even glued it together, and it was done. Just like that, I now had what feels and looks exactly what I wanted it to look and feel like. It's a perfect weight. I feel like I can't just hold it like that even. I feel like I need to have my hand over here to kind of balance it. But it feels great, and it looks great too. I really like the way that it came out, and it also works now. You can hear it. When you open it, you can see that I've got that little part right there for me to pour my liquid into. Now at the same time, because there's no way for it to let air out in another way, and I'm going from one size down to another, I'm likely to have an air bubble as I'm trying to pour in water. That means that the water might come back out or whatever I pour into it. So for that reason, as you're filling it, I need to be pulling on the trigger, and that'll suck all that liquid down into the bladder down here. Once when that's full, I close it up, and actually it's not only pulled it out of that area now where it actually won't come back out, but also the cap nicely pushes up against this, kind of sealing it. And at that point in time, it's ready to shoot, but I can't do that in here. So
now all we have to do is just test it to see how far it can shoot, and also how strong it is at shooting.
we decided to go ahead and use fresh cola, straight out of the fridge. And the problem was, those bubbles inside the gun only got agitated more. And that just basically made it just foamy. And so instead of shooting out, it just kind of threw a little bit of froth here and there. It didn't seem like it could really do much of anything. I think the key to using cola is that it has to be flat first. I think then it would have worked just fine. So to both clean out the gun and test it a little bit better, we went ahead and put in water. And it did make a big difference. The next thing we want to do is see how far this could actually shoot.
Okay, go ahead and start. Okay, walk out to as far as you can see that it goes. Is that as far as it's going right there? Okay, now let's measure it. Ready? You don't think it's gonna be long enough? That's a good sign. Ready, and go.
And measuring out to our average distance, it was longer than our 20-foot measuring tape. The description says it's supposed to be about 22 feet, so it probably is about 20 to 22 feet. So, it works. It's perfect. It's exactly what I wanted. It looks newer than my other one and beautiful in that way with a lot of nice detail and characteristics. But at the same time, it's ready for me now to take to New Vegas. But the question is, can I get it to New Vegas? So join us next time when we travel to the event, explore New Vegas,
Man.
meet its over 3,000 inhabitants, and answer the question, can I get this on the plane? Like, subscribe, comment below. This has been your Geek Fix.